Good morning, raccoons. You invited to join us in the pledge. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, have a seat, have a seat, have a seat. Man, didn't play my favorite song of all time. Okay, we got a lot going on this morning. First, we're going to do RCC like regular, a lot of things to celebrate as we head into a short week. And then we'll pause and transition into our Alice drill protocol review. All right, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Monday. We hope you all had a great weekend.
We have a short, brief RCC today, followed by our community meeting.
First things first, here's a quick look at this week's lunch menu. It looks delicious. Note that Thursday and Friday there is no lunch served because Thursday is a half day and Friday we don't have school.
It is also your last week to get Boo-Grams. Purchase them for $1 now through Wednesday at the top of the main staircase during lunch.
Huge announcements in sports today.
Cross country went to sectionals on Saturday, and boys came in first place with James, Jaden, Bryce, Troy, and Max getting top 10. They are now off to state. Also, congratulations to girls cross country who placed 5th. Congrats, cross country.
We also need to congratulate our girls volleyball team who are regional champs. Great start on the road to state. Congrats, girls.
Attention skiers, there's a ski team info and registration meeting today at 6:30 p.m. in the main cafeteria.
Up next, we have Brayden with this week's weather.
Hopefully everyone had a nice weekend with the nice weather we had yesterday. So looking into the weather this week, I have some good news and bad news. The good news is that we'll be much warmer this week than we have seen the last couple weeks. And the bad news is that every day this week looks to have chances of rain. So today, a high of 60 degrees and some chances of some rain showers, otherwise partly cloudy skies. And then we warm up for tomorrow with a high of 75 degrees and partly cloudy skies with some chances of some showers and maybe even a thunderstorm. And then Wednesday, a high of 65 degrees and rain is looking likely. Thursday, very similar to Wednesday with rain continuing and a high of 65 degrees. And then for your long weekend, looks to cool off a little bit with rain chances continuing.
Thank you, Brayden.
Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at OHS Digital Productions and Instagram at OHS_RCC. And as always, share your news with our team at rcc@osd.org.
Up next, we have Mr. Curtis with our community meeting, and no joke.
All
2
right.
minutes.
We're going to have a community meeting, so let's make sure our cell phones are in the cell phone pockets. We're going to set a timer for 2 minutes as we transition from RCC and that news to the importance of safety here on campus for our fall Alice drill. So timer for 2 minutes, cell phone in cell phone pockets, stretch a little bit, and then we'll have a seat and we'll go through the drill. All right, raccoons, our fall Alice drill. Just a couple quick things before we get started. Again, this is Officer Dawn. Remember, her new office is located in the main office by Mr. Flegner, Mr. Young, Miss Anders, and Mr. Nelson. So if you need her, that's where she is, or you'll see her moving about, whatever it might be. You can also send her an email to hosd@oasd.org. So that's there. Second thing to remember is there is a back channel. So as we're going through today's drill, your teachers have access to the Google Doc and should have all editing rights to be able to enter any questions that might pop up. And we'll either answer those questions live on air, depending on time, or maybe tomorrow, or I'll swing up to your room and we'll talk more about those individual situations that might pop up and go from there. There is no simulation to this drill today. So we're not actually barricading or evacuating. We are rather talking through scenarios as we think about the ALICE framework and our safety here on campus. So we'll guide through each one. There'll be a scenario, and then there'll be a timer up so that you can talk as a class as to how you might respond. So your teachers will help facilitate it, call on you like it's a normal class discussion, but in this instance, it'll be about safety and responding to a potentially threatening situation that might be occurring on campus. So there we go. So to get things started, we talked back at our safety seminar about a month ago when school started. It's going so fast. About the ALICE framework. Alert, lockdown, inform, counter, evacuate. The ALICE framework is built so that we have an idea of how to respond to an emergency situation. Because when something happens, we may freeze, we may pause, we may not know what to do. But the ALICE framework is about empowering us to be able to make a decision when faced with an emergency situation. So the decisions are pretty straightforward. When you get the information and you're aware of something that's going on, right, we have the opportunity to evacuate, get far away. We have the opportunity to counter because that individual or threat is close to us, so we need to engage in stopping them doing whatever it might be. We'll talk through that. Or we should barricade, lock ourselves somewhere, protect ourselves, keep us safe because that intruder is also nearby and evacuating would put us in harm's way. So that's all the information that we're going to work through and kind of discuss today. But just to refresh us on the ALICE drill, here is this year's safety seminar video on ALICE that we filmed this summer and broadcast to you in early September. So let's just get on the same page. Our most important emergency procedure process is our ALICE framework around an active shooter emergency situation on campus. ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Information, Counter, and Evacuation. This is a framework we can apply in any emergency situation, but especially an active shooter that might be happening given the situation that we're in. So let's break that down. First, the alert. First, we're always aware of what's going on around our surroundings. If we hear something that might be gunshots, if we're given an announcement or a warning or something is alerted over our phone that there's an emergency situation, we need to be aware of that, and that's that A. The other important part of that is being aware of your surroundings, how to quickly get out, how to know where your room is in any given situation that you might be unfamiliar with. That's why we have the maps. And we have to make sure that we're always aware of our surroundings, who's there, what's happening. The other important thing is that we have information, that we can share information, that if we see something or someone suspicious, we can give as much detail as possible. What that person's wearing, the color of their clothes, their approximate height, if they're wearing a hat, any identifying feature. Also, we want to make sure that we have the information we need to be able to relay anything to a law enforcement officer or to receive information like listening to the loudspeaker so we know what to do. If we hear there's an active shooter in North Campus and I'm in South Campus, that may inform what I do a little bit differently. So, once we're aware of a situation and we're alerted and we have information, then we're empowered with 3 possible scenarios to respond to that emergency situation. The first thing we can do is if we are aware that there's an active shooter or an emergency situation close to the location we're in, is we can lock down, barricade the room, get the door shut, make sure the door is locked, put things around the door to make sure that any active intruder can't easily enter into the classroom. That would be if the intruder's around us. So let's say we have information that the intruder's in Upper North and my classroom happens to be in Upper North, I would probably want to lock down. The second thing we can do is we can counter. If the active intruder is near us, then we will want to counter that intruder. Whether that means becoming physical with them or interrupting the flow of their routine to stop them from what they're doing. Sometimes we think about countering an intruder by simply screaming, flashing lights, or if we need to, become physical to take them down. Again, you have to be comfortable with that. Then the best scenario we have in an emergency situation, active shooter situation, is to evacuate, the E. Get out of the building as quickly as possible, head towards a rally point, but chances are an adult will be there indicating where you should go and to get further away. Again, get out of the building, head out of the building, look for an adult. There'll be plenty around in an emergency situation that will tell you where to go. That's the ALICE framework. We apply that again in an active shooter or an emergency situation where we're looking to apply a routine that would help us stay safe in any emergency situation. We're aware of our surroundings, we collect information, and then we have three options. We can get out of the building, which is the best option. We can counter the intruder if they're nearby, or we can barricade if that intruder is in the approximate vicinity of our classroom or office location. We practice our ALICE drills twice a year. We'll be doing that later this fall and then again in the spring to make sure we're aware of what to do in each independent situation. Here are some common questions when it comes to applying the ALICE framework.
How do I report suspicious information?
Great question. Suspicious information needs to be reported to a trusted adult immediately. If you notice something that's live in that moment where you notice there's something that is alarming, get an adult right away. However, there are mechanisms to report information if you're just concerned about someone or something and it just doesn't feel comfortable to you. We have the SUSO app. The SUSO app is on your class link. You can easily go in and report anonymously any concern you might have regarding safety on campus. This includes drug and alcohol use, someone's mental health and awareness, or if you're really concerned about someone's actions or what they might be looking up on the internet, you can report that anonymously. I get an automatic indication and we begin to investigate that from there. So the SUSO app is your anonymous reporting tool. Other than that, get an adult, report the information that you have, trust yourself. If you're concerned about it, just don't push it to the side. Report the information that you have if it is an indication to you that it's something we should be concerned about.
Is the ALICE drill just a school thing?
The great thing about ALICE is it's a framework that can help us respond to any emergency or active shooter situation. Whether we're at Summerfest, school, a football game, if we continuously think about, okay, we're alert and aware, we have information, now my options are to evacuate and get out of here as quickly as possible, counter the intruder because they're near me, or to quickly lock down in a safe space so that they can't enter and I can protect myself. That's the best situation you can do. Apply that framework to anywhere in life and hopefully it will help you navigate a really tough situation.
I heard Officer Dawn changed locations. Where's her new office at?
Officer Dawn's new location is in the main office right by the associate principals. This gives her quicker access to the rest of the building. It gives you centralized access to your administrative support team and Officer Dawn, and it will help make sure that she is available in the office where most of her work happens anyway. So Officer Dawn, check her out. She's over by the athletic office, by the associate principals. That's her new office. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how we would respond to certain scenarios. So if we counter, think about the room you're in. How would you counter? If you would evacuate, where would you evacuate to? And if you were to barricade, what would you barricade with? So we're going to have several scenarios, and then we're going to set a timer for about 1.5 minutes for you to talk as a class. Again, based off the scenario, would you counter and how? Would you evacuate? And where are your exits, where are the doors? And if you chose to barricade, what would that look like in your room? Maybe there's multiple exits, multiple doors, whatever that would be. So here's our first one. What would we do if there's an individual with a gun in lower south? Lower south. Orient yourself. Think about that. Talk about it. 1.5 minutes. Talk as a class. All right. Hopefully that gave you a chance to talk a little bit about how you respond to that situation. The most important thing probably would be aware of where you are in that room or in the building. So remember, our room numbers and the location of our rooms are located above our emergency call button. And if it's not there, then staff just email Mrs. McCartney and we'll get you a printed out one, right? So it will say that we are in upper north room 300, so we have an idea of where we are in the building. Remember, you may be familiar with your schedule, but maybe there's a substitute teacher and you have to move to a different room, or you're moving to a study hall, or whatever it might be. We should always be aware of our surroundings and just not get stuck in the routine that is our day. All right, you want to read the second situation?
If you hear the sound of gunshots from the little theater, what do you do?
Minute and a half, talk about that. Based off your location. All right. So we're here in Starkey White's room, and there's a lot of 4 different doors in here, and it's always a challenging room. But I asked Officer Dunn in this room if we heard gunshots coming from the Little Theater area, so north side of campus, where would we go?
So from this room, I would actually go towards the field house and go out the field house doors, because obviously you don't want to run towards the sound of the fire. You want to run away from it as quickly as possible.
And if we chose to evacuate in this situation, is there anything we can do to help the situation? So when we ran outside and law enforcement was coming up, should we present ourselves when we're running out of the building?
As you're exiting the building, there should not be anything in your hands. Keep them up in front of you so that they can see, because they're going to be doing a really quick once over just to make sure that, 1, you don't have a weapon, and 2, do you have any injuries that they need to redirect you towards EMS?
Awesome. So if you are to evacuate, and we kind of talked a little bit about that, maybe you haven't had that situation in our scenarios yet, then you have to make sure you present yourself as safe, or if you're needing help or assistance, maybe you're injured, you need to be communicating that as well. All right. Third and final scenario for this part here, again, what would you counter with? Where would you evacuate to? And how would you barricade if that was the situation you're in? If you hear an announcement over the loudspeaker that shots have been fired in lower north, room 115, and there's an individual seen with a gun heading up to upper north. So shots were fired in lower north, room 115, and then there's been an announcement that that individual is running towards upper north up the staircase. I don't know which one. We don't have that information. Minute and a half, talk about that one. For some of you, this will be a longer discussion. For some of you, it's pretty straightforward. All right. So we have 3 questions in the back channel that I think are really good for us to debrief on. But I also want to just emphasize one point about that last scenario. Right? We don't know what staircase that person was going up. So again, whereas the information that we have is the only thing that we can make our decisions off of. So again, you don't know if they're going up by the stairs, and if you're by Art and Miss Keene's room, like you might have been okay to evacuate out the back, or were they coming up your stairs? You just heard it and you heard they're going to upper north. That's the information we got. In a crisis situation, communication will be quick, fast, and rapidly changing. So you just have to kind of take what you got and go with the best decision that you can go from there. All right, so we got a few questions here in the back channel that I want to just talk through. We have attempted to barricade with belts, computer cables, etc. with little success in the past. Has the district considered purchasing door barricade devices? And the answer is yes, we certainly have considered it, but safety is safety all the way around. We also don't want to be trapped into a room or not be able to let a first responder into the room if we're trapped in. And also, we don't want to be locked into a room if there was a fire situation or whatever. So we have to plan for all different types of situations. In addition, remember, a barricade is designed to slow down the intruder. And we'll talk here in a second, right? So if they open your door a little bit, we have to make sure we're in blind spots so that that person and the weapon could not hurt us if they were to go in there. So again, the best thing that we can do, though, with a barricade, and I know in the past we haven't practiced it this way, is to teach with our doors locked. Our doors locked is the best barricade. Our door is locked, we can pull the magnet, we don't have to barricade with much. We don't need a device because the door is locked and that device is doing the same exact thing. In addition, we can lock our doors, staff, from the inside of our room. So if this door is shut and it's not locked, Ms. Starkey-White can go over with her key and she can lock that door from the interior part of her room. She doesn't need to go into the hallway to lock it if for some reason the door was unlocked. So the best barricade we have is locking our door and shutting the door if we choose to barricade, and then piling stuff up that would slow things down or whatever it might be. What is this procedure for those students at East Campus if they're an active shooter at main campus or vice versa, right? We would be relaying information to you as best as possible, and that relay of information would likely be to evacuate somewhere or to hold tight and wait for more information. So it is very much in our mind and in the first responders' minds that if something's happening at East Campus, we know how to communicate with main campus over to East Campus, and then likewise with all our neighbors. If there's an emergency situation at the hospital, we would get information on how to handle our main and East Campus as well if we needed to stay in place or whatever it might be. And there's been situations with gas leaks, and there's been situations with, police driving and trying to get somebody where we've gotten calls and we've had to make decisions on what to do in the building or slow down a passing period or whatever it might be. So just again, wait for that information and we have ways to relay it and to have that. If an emergency were to occur at East Campus, would Main go to a rally point or vice versa? Is there emergency at Main? Would East evacuate? Again, we just wait for the information depending on what that emergency is. Students have suggested it'd be helpful to say social studies wing, English wing, along with upper lower south because that's what they call them. And that's not a bad idea, and that's a conversation that we had. The challenge is with saying there's an active shooter in the English wing. Well, English is taught across this building. There's some English classes in Center Campus. There's some English classes in Lower South. There's also a health class there. So it's not just defined by subject areas. So that can create some confusion. In addition, our law enforcement officers have asked us not to necessarily name our buildings or areas of our building by subject area because it's confusing for them. When a law enforcement officer responds and says there's shots fired in social studies,
They're not going to know where social study is, but we know where north, south, east, and west is because of our maps around the building.
Yeah. So they study this building, and you may see other officers in here from time to time. Sometimes you bring new officers through. Just get familiar with where things are at. So while it's our language, it's not necessarily the language of safety. So that's why I know it's hard to remember Lower North, Center Campus, where you are. That's why we post them into your room. At schools where there has been active shooters, did those admin at the schools use the PA system? I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that one either. I'd have to look that up and get back to you.
Obviously, the PA system is the best way for us to get information out to everybody, and we're going to practice that here in a second. But again, too, I think it would depend on the scenario and the situation, right? If the main office had evacuated, that's where the PA system's set up. I have access to make an announcement over my phone, but it's hard to hear, so we haven't really done that. So it's not the best. But information will get out. The PA system is just one of many different ways. We have heard scenarios where intruders pretend to be police to try to get in. How will the police identify themselves?
There will be no doubt that it's officers outside the room because it will be more than one. There'll be a team of at least 4 officers. They'll either be calling into the room or they'll actually have your teacher call out to you. So that way it is verified that it is an officer. If in doubt, just stay in your room and wait. If you're uncomfortable with opening up the doors, it's no rush. We're going to be taking our time going through the building, making sure everything is secured and clear, and then start evacuating everybody else out of the building.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to reflect on our current environment, and we're actually going to jump ahead to slide 2. So the question is, if you choose to barricade, think a little bit about what you would barricade with if you haven't been presented with that scenario based off of the other scenarios. But what are the blind spots in your room so that you can hide after you've built your barricade? So where can you position your bodies away from the angle of the door where if an intruder were to get in, you would be able to be in a spot where they couldn't necessarily see you right away. So set the timer, minute and 30 seconds, blind spots in your room. Where do you go after you barricade? Awesome. Going to next slide, I'm going to ask Officer Dunn to just talk through this and listen and pay attention to your surroundings. What might you do or use to counter an intruder if you're in your current classroom? But she's going to talk general in the classrooms, what's around.
All right, so if an intruder gets into the classroom, you're going to do everything possible to distract them. You're going to flash lights, you're going to throw things, you're going to yell, you're going to scream. The biggest thing is continue to move around the room and try to get out of the room. You can throw whatever you want at them and do whatever you have to do just to get out of that room.
Perfect. And I think the important thing there is yell and scream. Anything, it's countering includes being a distraction towards that person, right? Yelling, screaming, police, whatever it might be, anything that might slow this person down or get them to stop their flow of what they're doing from there. Next one is, and we're not going to talk about it, but I'm just going to kind of talk through just real quick. What are the closest exits out of the building based off of your current location, but also be aware of the exits that exist across our building when it might be passing period, when you might be in a different room. We have a lot of doors in and out of our building, which can present some challenges, as we'll talk about in a second, but it can also be a good thing in case there were a fire or an emergency or we wanted to get out. So that's where we kind of have to take the good with the bad with our building layout, design in any emergency situation. You always want to know your closest exits out. Any place you are. Movie theater, before you sit down, figure out your closest exit. Concert, before you go, figure out your closest exit and how you're going to go, where you're going to go, right? Wherever you are, store, mall, whatever, home, figure out your closest exits in case of an emergency, whether that is an intruder, a fire, whatever it might be. All right. Next step in our drill here is we're going to talk about the sharing of information. So one thing we're going to simulate right now is this PA system. We know that the biggest and easiest way, we just had it this morning where we had, a CPI call, right, to get teams and people together is to announce over the loudspeaker. But sometimes that information is delayed. And so it's important to remember that when you hear something over the loudspeaker, maybe intruder in lower south or lower north, room 115, like we just had, that news you may be getting may be a bit delayed. So we're just going to try this out for a second here. We're going to hit the call button here in room 216. It's going to call to the office, and we're going to report some information, and then they're going to do a speaker over the loudspeaker. So we're going to set the timer here. All right, hit the button. So we hit the button. It rang.
Hi, do you have an emergency?
And so we talk to the speaker up there, the red button. Yes, this is our test. Can you do our all test?
Yeah, thank you.
She heard me.
Test, test, this is a test.
All right. So that was 50 seconds, 50 seconds from when we first identified a situation where we needed support, maybe it's a medical, whatever it is, and it took 50 seconds for that information to come. So it does get a little bit delayed. You don't necessarily have the best, it's the best way to communicate out, but it may not be the most timely information. And of course, in a situation, maybe things will go faster. The urgency in my voice might trigger for things that, to get out there, but we're pressing buttons. It's not as easy as just picking up a phone and making an announcement. There's things that they have to do in the main office. And we also know the main office is a busy place, so they're juggling a lot of information. So just wanted you to have that experience. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at a photo that's going to come up on your screen. You're going to look at that photo, and you're going to have about 5 seconds to identify defining features of this individual. So we're doing one of them. We've got the last one. Let's bring up that photo of that person. They got it? Good. We're looking. We're checking that out. Okay, next slide. What do you remember about that individual? Don, what would be helpful information for you to have about that one individual we just saw the photo of that we think might be suspicious?
What they have on, what they're wearing, anything they're carrying, what they're doing with their hands, their demeanor, how they're walking. Are they walking fast, walking slow? Color of clothes, what they look like, approximate age.
Perfect. So in this situation, it would be helpful to know they had a backpack on. It'd be really helpful to know it was a bluish backpack. I don't think we need to get down to teal or whatever shade of blue that might be, right? Short sleeve shirt, right? And it may be possible that they ditched their backpack or their headphones and they don't have them anymore. But if we're looking at cameras and we're able to see what this person may have had on when you saw them, it will help us follow them and identify them as well. And again, physical features may change, but again, this person has shorter hair. They're not going to grow their hair long all of a sudden, right, and go from there, right? So just keep in mind, and any information you can relay will help the first responders or an administrator help to identify or look for that individual when we're trying to identify them in a need. But it's going to be really quick.
Yes, very quick.
So height, right, hair, things that they're wearing, defining features, anything you remember. Maybe you see this person has earrings in, right? It's really hard to see. Depends how close you are to them. There's a lot of other stuff. What do you got?
We're good.
Anything else? Good.
Got it.
All right. Other thing about sharing information is we have the SUSO app. And I know a lot of you use the SUSO app. Remember, the SUSO app is on your class link, can also be accessed online. SUSO, when you write a report or you make a report, you stay anonymous. It gets sent to my cell phone. It gets sent to Officer Don. If it's an emergency situation, then it actually also goes to the Oconomowoc Police Department. So if it's over the weekend or whatever, and it needs to be elevated to the point where maybe Officer Don and I aren't checking because it's nighttime or the middle of the night, then they will also respond and take care of the situation and loop us in later. Okay. Next thing we're going to do to close out the drill is talk about proactive strategies. So can we watch the proactive strategy video? There are so many practices here at Oconomowoc High School that are both visible and behind the scenes to ensure that we stay safe at all possible times. I want to go over a few proactive safety measures that we need your help in ensuring that we follow to make sure we stay safe here on campus. versus ID badges. We need to make sure we have our IDs on at all times. When we enter a building, East Campus or Main Campus, from the outside, during the school day, you're going to need to show your ID to be able to come in. It's a safety measure and a process that allows us to ensure the students coming into the building are our actual students. It's also important to have your ID at all events. This is for a couple different reasons. It helps you get in for free, but also if there's an emergency situation where maybe you become unconscious or whatever it is, we'll be able to identify who you are and activate our safety plans around that. IDs are critical. That's why you need to have them on you at all times. Also, when it comes to IDs, we need to make sure our staff members are wearing IDs. Staff member IDs are always visible. That's the way you can identify a safe adult in the building. If we have a guest that comes into the building, they first must register in the main office, they go through a quick background check, and then they're printed a temporary guest ID badge that they should be wearing on them. It's happened before where you've seen a guest in the building who does not have their ID badge visible. This includes our Pepsi representatives, our ATM representatives, guests to the building, buildings and grounds, whatever it might be. Everybody needs to have an ID badge on them if they're an adult. If you notice somebody without one, doesn't mean it's an emergency situation. However, it does mean that you should make an adult aware that there's another adult in the building without a guest badge on. They can contact me and I'll work through the process to ensure that we're safe. So again, look for that and report if you see somebody without an ID badge or guest badge on that is an adult. All right, the other thing we need to make sure that we're doing is we're not propping doors open or opening doors for other people. We are not propping doors opening or opening doors for other people. If we prop a door open, we're only allowing somebody who is unsafe to enter our building and to potentially cause harm. The best thing we can do to stay safe is to be proactive in our safety and make sure everybody comes in through secure entrances. Even if we see one of our raccoon friends coming in late for class and they are running, and they're banging on the door, we do not open the door for them. We have to, again, enter through our safe processes and entry points to ensure that our building maintains its safety at all times. Those are the proactive measures that we can take to ensure that we stay safe at all times. When something does happen, and there is a reactive measure that we need to be able to report because somebody's not wearing an ID badge, there's a door propped open, a suspicious bag, we need to make sure we're reporting that to a trusted adult as soon as possible. We suggest you avoid email, that you don't necessarily send an email alerting us of an emergency situation because I may not check my email instantly. Rather, we need to tell an adult, a teacher, an administrator, someone in the hallway of what's going on so that they can get in touch with the people that are most important. Here are some common questions that come to some of our proactive safety measures.
What should I do if I see a door propped open?
Shut it. Worse than propping a door open is walking past a propped door. Just shut it, remove what's being there, the pencil, the piece of wood, the book, whatever it is, and return it to the office or just leave it to the side. But shut propped doors when you see them propped open.
Are there any allergy restrictions I should be aware of?
Good question. Our learning spaces are nut-free, so we cannot have nuts within our learning spaces. If you do have a peanut butter sandwich or a nut-based product that you're having for a snack or for lunch, make sure you eat it in the cafeteria and that the table is not designated as a nut-free table. We do have nut-based products for sale in our athlete vending machine in the field house. If you purchase a nut-based product, make sure you're eating it at a nut-approved, safe eating area.
What should I do if I lose my ID?
Good question. Your IDs are worth $15, so you don't want to lose your ID. If you lose it, we'll print you a new one for $15. It's also important to think about the ID not just as your entry point or as a way to identify you, but there are also important resources on the back of your ID. If you notice a friend that might need help or support, there's ways to get them the mental health resources that might help connect them to getting them the support that they need. And there's also some guidelines to follow there, and then also a number to text if you're in need of any support or help, especially outside the school day or over the summer or over the weekends if you're just struggling a little bit and need some guidance and support. All right, so proactive strategy. So we tested these strategies this past week, raccoons. We had two scenarios that we tested. First one is we left a package over by Rocky's Test Kitchen on Friday morning. And it had a note to say, return this package to the office, right?
Correct.
And when we went home on Friday, where was the package?
It was still over there.
Again, if we're seeing things in the hallway left behind, they probably have expensive stuff. It's not that it's like a threat or we're worried that the package may cause harm or be something that explodes or whatever, but it probably has someone's laptop or Chromebook in there that can cost a lot of money, and we should get that. We should get that back to the office so that person looking for it can get it, or we avoid something getting stolen like a cell phone or a pair of keys or whatever it might be. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay. The other one is, we talked a little bit about the doors. We had a situation where we had somebody from our community tried to get into our campus, I believe it was last Wednesday, and enter in through a door that they shouldn't, and then walk around without an ID or any identifying factor that we just talked about in there. So what happened there last Wednesday?
So the person from the community, I just gave them a time frame to see if they could get in through a secure door that should have been secured during that time. And they were able to enter the building because the student let them in without questioning them, without redirecting them towards the office. And then that person was able to walk around the school for about 30 minutes before I actually went and got them and escorted them out.
Okay. So again, this is why I know we get into habits of letting, oh, we know who this person is, let's let them in, whatever it might be. Even our office staff are checking IDs of everybody that comes through the building. You guys have been doing great with that this year. So that brings up one of the questions here, right? We continue to struggle on Lower North with students opening doors and letting friends in. And that is a problem. Again, we know that you're trying to be a friend, you're trying to let them in, you feel like you know them or whatever it might be, but we've got to stop, and we might have to, if it's continuing to be a problem, staff, if you're noticing it, please do an office referral, or at the very least, let us know the time you observed it so we can pull up the camera and we can start to educate people around that, because we do need to take the next steps of consequences, which could be what?
The person coming in the door would be trespassing because they don't have permission to be entering that point, and the person letting them in, they're not where they're supposed to be, so they'd also be loitering.
Just go to the front.
Yep.
A trespassing ticket, a loitering ticket versus a tardy warning. And most importantly, it's our safety. You don't necessarily know who that person is, what that person's doing. In addition, when people are checking in at the main office, we are also, when we have doors unlocked, have staff there, we're visually assessing. What are people here today? What's their mood? What's going on? Right? So there are procedures for entering our campus that you don't know about, and you taking this in your own hands is putting us all at risk of something bad happening. You don't know who everybody is. It's a big school, and you could get some pretty serious consequences. So staff, if you're seeing people prop the door open, or if you're seeing people let people in, if you don't know who they are, at least email us a date, time, so that we can pull it up on the camera and start to hold people accountable. I think it's also important to note that we have to make sure we shut the door behind us, especially in the field house. If you're going out to East Campus or if you're coming from the weight room, the air blowing right now is not allowing that door to shut all the way. There's nothing that can be done. We just have to shut the door behind us, right? So the airflow is just keeping that door open a little bit. There's no rock there. There's nothing malicious, but we have to shut doors behind us just to make sure they close all the way. Make sense? All right. Another question that popped up, and we'll wrap things up here. If someone is injured during an evacuation situation, what should they do, or where should they go?
That would depend on the extent of the injury. If it's something like a sprained ankle where you're able to just give them a little extra support, holding them up to get them out of the building, if you're comfortable with it, help them get them out of the building. If it's something where it's an incapacitating injury where they're down and they can't get up, your safety's first. You have to look, where is the threat? Is the threat heading towards you? Are you able to get them out safely? Your safety is number one, which is sad, but sometimes you might have to leave a friend behind just to get yourself out.
Good. Another question, what should students do if an intruder happened to come in during lunch or passing period, or if we're at a volleyball game or a football game or whatever it would be, right? And I think a lot of it depends on the situation and where you are and how that information is getting spread. So what would your advice be there, Don?
Let an adult know right away. Let school staff know right away. If there's an associate principal at the sporting event, let them know what's going on. If it's during the school day, let your teacher know so that they can call down to the office so it can be addressed right away who they are and why they're in the building.
And I think the next big thing from my lens is getting that information out. If you see someone suspicious or something happens, there's an intruder or whatever, scream with that information, right? This man has a gun. This is what he's wearing. And then that relay of information will occur, and we will respond as best we can. And we have procedures in place. We practiced a couple years ago a situation where we evacuated in the middle of passing period, and we had things behind the scenes that we're not going over to make sure that we can take those next steps and go from there. And then it just kind of popped up here, and someone took it down, and maybe I can't see it. It was a great point. When you're leaving the building, you need to be aware of people entering the building. So if you're choosing to leave the main doors and there's visitors waiting to come in, you have to make sure they go through the office. If you're leaving Lower North to go home for a senior plan or lunch or whatever, and there's someone waiting to come in, you have to send them to the office. So it's just not about letting people in and saying, come on in. It's about when you're leaving, not holding a door open so that someone coming into the building can access the building in that way. So you have to be aware of that as well. It's a really important thing to consider. So I don't know where that went on the back channel, but great point. Who did that? Oh, there it is. All right. All right. We could talk about this all day, but we got to get to class. So two things I just want to point out. One, students, you got in your email a little survey, just assessing how you feel on campus, safe, empowered around some of these procedures we talked about. Take that survey over the next day. Maybe if you got class and time now to do it real quick, it shouldn't take you more than a minute, minute and a half to do, just assessing if you feel empowered around safety on campus. So you got that email around 9 a.m. from Miss Anders. So fill that out when you have time, and we'll go from there. And then the second thing I just want to say is how incredibly proud I continue to be of us as a school and a community. Last week's Career College Life Readiness Day showcased us to the community, our power, the power we have to take control of our learning and stay committed to our goals. We talk about being grounded, committed, and accountable. And certainly all those values are not something we're all perfect at. We're not always grounded in our principles and values. Sometimes we fall short of our commitment, and every now and then we need to be held accountable. That's the journey of life, but we strive to be those value statements as we navigate this crazy 704-day journey that is high school. And last week, there were certainly a lot of things that could have maybe put a little blimp in your journey as you're working through this. We've had to deal with some tough stuff, but we are rebounding really well, and I couldn't be more proud of the raccoons that you are out in the community, the way you represent us. So we got a lot of fun planned this week. It's a short week. We got cross-country state for the boys. We got volleyball sectionals. We hope you show up, cheer on your raccoons, and enjoy the short week. It's going to be the best day of our life.